Okay, appreciate everybody showing up today. We will continue with our lesson on the beast from Revelation 13. Matter of fact, we just finished verse 13 of Revelation 13, which talked about the image of the beast, which we identified as on the physical level as being the United States. And he doth great wonders, that he maketh fire to come down out of heaven in sight of men. And the United States did that by creating the atomic bomb. And the atomic bomb brought fire out of uranium, and uranium comes from the Greek word for heaven. So if we have that, we could say that the image of the beast causes fire to come from uranium in the sight of man. And that's exactly what the United States did. So that's a very interesting correspondence there. Now we're going to go into the sign of the Son of Man, which is pretty interesting. Now, the Christ represented the positive nucleus of the atom, and his burial and crucifixion represented the Christ, which is in us all. All of us have in our core of our being the Christ consciousness and a link to God itself. And this is his burial in the tomb of matter is symbolic of us being buried in the tomb of matter itself here in this sphere. We have descended from spirit down to matter, and this buries our Christ God consciousness, making it very hard to access. And then the tomb of matter was split open, and the eternal life escaped. And this is symbolic of the splitting of the atom, where the uranium atom was split in two, and a certain amount of its substance was converted to pure energy, and this gives the energy of the atomic bomb. So it's interesting how the atomic world corresponds so much to the human world, that not only do humans evolve, but atoms evolve. Atoms evolve from simple hydrogen with just one proton in the middle and one electron circling around, to radium. When it evolves into radium, it has uranium has 235 neutrons and protons. Radium has a little bit less than that. But the thing about radium is radium glows in the dark. And this is what happens to a human when he evolves. Now, radium is the first element where all 7 electron shells become activated. Okay. Now, in a human, what it corresponds to the 7 electron shells of the atom.
Of the chakras?
Right, the 7 chakras. And what happens when all of the 7 chakras are activated?
Well, Jesus activated all 7 of his chakras, and he glowed in the dark.
Right, and so did Moses.
So did Moses.
Now, I would assume that maybe that light may not always be visible to everybody, but it was visible to Peter, James, and John on the Mount of Transfiguration. And it says when Moses come down from the mountain, that was really visible for him. He was so bright they had to put a covering over his head for when he was really bright. So
He was so bright they had to wear shades.
yeah. They couldn't bear to look on him, according to the Old Testament, anyway.
I'm having a hard time looking at you, Joe. You're starting to radiate a little bit yourself.
Yeah, right. So we have these seven shells also, and when they are activated, we're more and more full of light. Jesus talked about if our eye is single to the glory of God, the light within us will be great. And if not, then we will be in darkness. And he says, how great will be that darkness?
I'm so bright, my father calls me son.
Did you just think of that on the spur of the moment, Ed, or did you read that somewhere?
No, I made that up years ago.
You haven't heard that before?
Yeah,
Somebody, Daddy calls him son.
Ed's got more one-liners memorized than anybody I ever met. So anyway, as we evolve the same way, and as we evolve, and they're not called electron shells, but they're called chakras, and the chakras become activated. And as they more and more become activated and the petals open, there's more and more light. But for most of us, we won't be glowing in the dark, but we will be glowing with the light of understanding. And so anyway, it talks about, so the sign of the Son of Man is, everybody's expecting this great sign to be something with like Jesus coming in the clouds and everybody looks up and there he is. But here it talks about the sign being given after a period of great tribulation. And the tribulation was so great that it talks about, Daniel speaks about the holy people would be attacked by this Antichrist character. And then Matthew 24 says that unless the tribulation is shortened for these people, no flesh would be preserved. Okay.
Well, that was Hitler. Hitler
Right.
and the Jews.
Right. And who's the holy people?
No, the Jews.
Right, the Jews. And who threatened to exterminate every Jew that's in existence?
Mr. Hitler.
Yeah. And so if Hitler's days were not shortened,
He
then
would have done it.
all the Jews would have been killed. And none of their flesh would have been preserved. And then it says, immediately after the tribulation of those days, where the Jews were so threatened that they were in danger of being exterminated. It says, immediately after this, shall the sun be darkened, and the moon shall not give her light, and the stars shall fall from heaven, and the powers of heaven shall be shaken. Then shall appear the sign of the Son of Man in heaven, and all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. Now you got to remember that when John wrote this, he didn't have any of the language we have for atomic explosion. But consider this. When the explosion come, and he says the sign would come from the east, and where did the world first witness the atomic explosion?
From the East.
In the east, Japan.
Yeah.
I know. They didn't know anything about that explosion, the test in New Mexico that was not published to the world at all. It was top secret. But the one in Japan, the whole world witnessed in the east as lightning, the sign of the Son of Man appearing there. Okay, and here it gives a description of the sign of the Son of Man. The sun shall be darkened and the moon shall not give her light. So the blast was so bright, you couldn't even, it blotted out the sun and the moon and the stars. You couldn't see any of those. And then it says, the powers of the heavens shall be shaken. Okay, remember that the word uranium comes from Uranus, the same word that heaven comes from. So if we substitute the word uranium for heaven, and uranium comes from the word heaven, okay, and the powers of uranium shall be shaken, okay. And this is a closest description to how the atomic bomb works that John could have written in his day. The powers of uranium would be shaken and produce tremendous light and power that would be appear, and then shall the sign of the Son of Man heaven appear. And here's the effect. After the powers of uranium are shaken, it says all the tribes or all the people of the earth will mourn, for they shall see the sign of the Son of Man coming in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. So imagine John seeing the first atomic bomb going off. What better description than being in the clouds of heaven with power and great glory? I mean, it was the most powerful thing that the world had ever witnessed to that time. Now, when it speaks of the tribes of the earth mourning and the peoples of the earth, regular Christians say, well, that's because the wicked will see Jesus coming in clouds of heaven and they'll be mourning over that. But no, you look at the exact wording. It says all the people of the earth will mourn. Now, if Jesus was really coming on the clouds of heaven, there'd be a whole bunch of Christians just cheering. Oh boy, Jesus is showing up, you know. But it says the whole earth will mourn when they see this sign. Okay. And when you think of it, the atomic bomb, when it first went off, is the only sign that's ever been given that concerned every single human on the earth. When we saw that, we thought, oh man, what a weapon. You know, if that gets disseminated over the planet, we could have destruction of the human race. And even Einstein said right after, he said the world, he says, if World War III is fought with nuclear weapons, the next war will be fought with sticks and stones, something to that effect. And so all the world mourned nobody was happy when they saw that go off. We were maybe happy the war was ending, but beyond that, everyone was concerned about this tremendous power being unleashed.
Yeah, everybody was saying, woe is us, woe is us. You know, it could happen to us.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, what I find interesting in your interpretations is Hitler was surrendered first, and after the tribulation, he was the master of the tribulation, and it says immediately after the tribulation, then the sun shall be darkened. So it was only like 4 months later, in August 6th, that the first bomb was dropped. So
Yeah, in the scheme of things, that's about as immediate as you could expect. Right after Hitler was put down, and the bomb went off in Japan.
Boom.
Just like the prophecy says. So it's a really it's almost too exact of a prophecy to have been just created out of the blue by somebody.
Right.
Yeah. And then it says, and he shall send his angels with the sound of a trumpet, and they shall gather the elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. Now learn a parable of the fig tree. When his branch is yet tender and putteth forth leaves, ye know that summer is nigh. So likewise, ye, when ye shall see these things, know that it is near, even at the doors. Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass until all these things are fulfilled. Which generation is he talking about?
Our generation.
Generation that saw the sign of the Son of Man.
Yeah, that's us.
We will not all die until we the basic prophecies here are fulfilled. Which
When were you born, Joe? What year were you born?
I was born February 6, 45, just before the atomic bomb went off.
Okay.
Yeah. So if, in other words, people think that the Christ will make his reappearance before all of this generation will pass. If that's included and all these things be fulfilled. So that's something to look forward to. And yeah, I'm 79 now, and I'm one of the last ones born before the bomb went off. So hopefully I can live to be 100 or so and live to see all these things be fulfilled.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah.
So that's talking about whoever was alive during that Holocaust, that explosion.
Yeah.
That would be you. And who else? I don't know. There could be some. I don't think anybody here is older than you.
I
Maybe
was
Ed,
born
Ed
in
is.
1938.
Yeah, if I don't live to be old enough, you got to live to be old enough to see it, Ed.
I remember when the war was over, we were living in Missouri, my dad shot off his shotgun off the back porch.
Yeah, I know my parents tell me how they danced in the street, and everybody was really happy when the war ended. Okay, any more questions on that? It's pretty interesting how how it corresponds so well, especially if you take in consideration the corresponding prophecies of Daniel, and along with Matthew 24.
JJ,
Yeah.
is there another interpretation for this, for the personal, for the evolution of personal spiritual evolution of the
Yeah, I think I talked
individual?
about it a little bit, but the we have the Christ in us, and we have the sign of the Son of Man in us also. And once you reach a certain degree of evolution, you have like a spiritual explosion, and it's concerning, just like it is, all the inhabitants of the earth were concerned when they saw the sign. And it's concerning two ways. Number one, as your centers begin to evolve, they release different energies. And as the higher energies are released, it's difficult for the disciple to handle. And so he's quite concerned about that. And also, as these energies are released and he attains a degree of enlightenment, then just like all the tribes of the earth are concerned about the bomb, everybody that knows this guy is concerned about the guy because maybe he's been in a certain religion all his years and all of a sudden he breaks out and everybody's concerned and mourns over him. And so this sign of the Son of Man appears in the disciple as he progresses along. But the external application of this is so precise that that's actually the more interesting part of the interpretation of this particular part here, because Revelations 13 really applies to what's happening in the world as we see it, as well as to the internal workings of the individual disciple and his effect on the people around him.
So as his chakras begin to become inflamed and activated, won't he go through greater temptations? It's like he's going to have to deal with his emotional aspect all over, his sexual appetites all over, his lower mind, his being drawn into the glamours of the world. Won't he have to go through his own tribulation as he ascends?
Well, what happens is he has these higher spiritual experiences until he goes through the third initiation, which is like the explosion of the atomic bomb. This happened with Jesus and Moses when they lit up their faces actually lit up. So that would be a correspondence to the atomic bomb going off for us. So the sign of the Son of Man appeared in Jesus on the Mount of Transfiguration. Now, as they progress, you settle back down, and then the lower nature tries to make another attempt to.
Right, that's what I'm talking about.
And normally, at this point, once the disciple reaches this point where the sign of Son of Man appears in him, he is usually able to resist the lower nature and keep it under control. But the problem he has is the lower nature and everybody he's associated with comes and attacks him. And so he has a person expressing the higher nature has a powerful effect on those dominated by the lower nature. He actually stimulates the lower nature in average people. And this is demonstrated with the Tibetan. A lot of people during World War II were saying they were praying for Hitler, that he would feel the love and everything. And DK said, no, he says, don't pray for Hitler. He says, because if you send love to somebody like this, he says the vibration will be reduced when he receives it, and it will stimulate his lower vibrations and give his lower vibrations even more power. He says, so just ignore him. He says, don't send him love.
Leave him alone.
Yeah, I found that to be an interesting statement, completely contrary to anything I'd ever read by any New Age person, which is always send love to everybody. But he says there's people on the dark path. He says sending love doesn't do any good. Now, if a person is not on the dark path, sending love is a great thing to do for anybody that's like the average person. But those Nazis were beyond the influence of love. So they and the inner, especially Hitler's inner circle, were beyond the influence. So matter of fact, he actually told his inner circle to ignore any feelings of compassion or love you have toward, especially the Jews or anyone that they consider an enemy, and just make a decision. These are the enemies, and we will do what necessary to wipe them out. And that's what he taught his inner circle, to just completely ignore anything related to compassion. And that's what they did. And so that's one of the reasons sending love to Hitler wouldn't do any good. So he actually told his readers to not send Hitler any love.
They were so blind, that's why they were called Nazis.
Yeah.
Because it has the opposite effects.
Yeah. And this happens now. Jesus was perhaps the most loving person in our history, yet look how the acts of love he performed stimulated the lower nature of his enemies. They threw rocks at him. They tried to get him ostracized. They threw him out of the synagogue and threw his followers out of the synagogues, and eventually crucified him. So he stimulated their lower natures, and this is what happens when the sign of the Son of Man begins to manifest in the disciple. And then it causes all of the people of the lower nature to be disturbed and have their lower natures, the flaws in them amplified so they come to the surface.
Yeah, I like that statement by the Tibetan. It says, perfection brings imperfection to the surface.
Yeah, good drives evil from the form of man in time and space.
Yeah.
Verse. Yeah, that's one of my favorites. Okay, any more comment on that?
I've got a
Yes, I have
question.
a
Go ahead, Maria.
Okay. This, I don't know, but all the Christian martyrs comes to mind then. I always wondered why they had to suffer so horribly. And that must have been because the light provoked the lower nature of their surroundings, something like that, to be so horribly treated, and that they withstand it also, that they really went to death for their faith, or what?
He just realized this would happen, and concerning himself, he just let everything go because he realized in the end he would be crucified there. So he accepted his fate. But that doesn't always happen. And his disciples, he gave his disciples some interesting advice. He says, be as wise as serpents and as harmless as doves, because he understood by sending them out, if they made too much, disturbed the beast too much, that the beast could attack them and destroy them prematurely. And another place he says, make friends with mammon. So in other words, he warned his disciples. He says, look, you're going against some really bad dudes here that can do you a lot of harm. So you need to be as wise as serpents, harmless as doves, and be as non-threatening as possible to these authorities, basically is the message that he gave them. But he said, even so, there are people that will eventually rise up and kill you and think they're doing God's work. But he warned them about that also. So if they're going to go do the work, it's impossible to do it without creating some disturbance toward the beast. Okay. Anything else?
I got some.
Yeah, Scott.
So last week you talked about the dragon, and I'm paraphrasing, but said anytime something true begins surfaces, then the dragon would enter in and basically stop its evolution. Do whatever it needed to do to stop that truth from evolving and moving forward. And I'm just wondering if the dragon is literally the Dark Brothers, or is it an energy by itself? Because it sounds like what we're talking about today is sort of the same thing. Is that just an energy that's out there and that's what it does? Or is it the actual mechanics and workings of the Dark Brothers that do this?
We live in a world of duality. So where you have light, you have darkness. And so this happens this way, that the disciple, as he progresses, assumes greater and greater light. And as a truth is introduced, it's resisted by all the forces, and these are like natural forces pretty much, but the natural forces are used by intelligent dark entities. Okay, but there's these natural forces because of duality that's out there. And so as the truth then is a new truth is presented, the powers that be out there will resist and do everything to suffocate them so they're not realized by the public. But then sooner or later, the truth becomes so obvious that it can't be suppressed any longer. And when it reaches this point, then the beast will embrace the truth, say, okay, this little what happened, it took 300 years for this to happen with Christianity. And then Constantine comes forward and he says, okay, we can't beat this thing. We can't suppress it. We've persecuted these people. We fed them to the lions. We've crucified them, and nothing stops them. So what we'll do is we'll embrace it, and then we'll corrupt it. Change it to fit our needs. Okay. And so by the time we're done with it, it will be a tool that we can use to control the people. And so this is what the natural evolution has happened time and time again in the history of the earth. A great work comes forward and it's fought against, and sometimes it's suppressed and doesn't surface for a long time. There's a lot of early Christian teachings that were suppressed for 2,000 years and finally revealed in the Dead Sea Scrolls. So it was 2,000 years they were suppressed. So a lot of these things were suppressed. But eventually, when it comes forward and it's unable to suppress them anymore, then the dark powers will embrace them and alter them to so the deadly wound that they received was healed. And this is what happens. This is what happened with our Constitution. Our Constitution was produced a deadly wound to one of the heads of the beast, but the deadly wound was healed because the dark forces came forward and saying, okay, we'll embrace the government of the United States, but we're going to alter it so we can use it to our advantage and create all these bureaucracies that are not elected by the people, that are under our control, and they'll wind up telling everybody what to do. And there are, I read the amount of rules and regulations created, not by Congress, but by unelected authorities. I can't remember the number, but it's in the many thousands of rules, laws, regulations that are just as authoritative in this country as laws passed by Congress, but they're just decreed by unelected bureaucrats. And so the beast has done the same thing with this country. It's not complete yet, and we can turn it around. It's still possible, but to a large degree, the deadly wound issued by the Constitution was healed. Okay, well, next we're going to talk about the mark of the beast, which is quite interesting. So keep that.
The image of the beast?
Yeah, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast. And the 666 is coming up. That's one of the more interesting parts of the whole book. Okay, my friends, we need
JJ?
Yeah.
I've got a question for you. Going back to what you said about DK admonishing not to send Hitler and people like him light and love because it will stimulate their lower nature. In today's world, how do we then deal with world leaders that are beholden to their lower nature? We've in the past tried to send light and love to Putin and Zelensky in the battle in Ukraine and the communist leaders in China. But it seems to me that might have been counterproductive. What do we do?
Where we need to send the light and love is to the people that are sensitive to it, that are in contact with these people. Okay, so there were a lot of good people in Germany during World War II that could have used that love and light energy rather than Hitler. And if for instance, the conspirators led by Stauffenberg had received more energy, it's possible they could have succeeded in taking out Hitler. But nobody was even thinking about them. They were just thinking about sending Hitler all this love.
One thing you did, JJ, in those meditations where we sent light to world leaders was you said to focus on their higher self or their solar angel and send the energy there so that they could transmute it, in a way that these personalities might receive it better.
Yeah, and some of the world leaders are capable of are not on the dark side. They're just don't see everything clearly. So if it's that type of leader that you think isn't on the dark side, well, sending him light and love through his soul would be good. But once a person chooses the dark path, then he's out of contact with his soul. So his soul is unable to even get any message to him.
He's cut off.
And love has to go through the soul, real love. So if it can't enter the soul, then it stimulates his lower nature, according to DK. Kind of interesting teaching that I haven't seen anywhere else, but it
Makes sense.
It registers with my soul that there's truth behind that. Okay, my friend.